Dr. Erica Olstein with A Better You Healthcare Acupuncture and Eastern Medicine. As primary care physicians, we use acupuncture to treat back pain, arthritis, migraines, allergies, high blood pressure, thyroid disorders, hormone imbalances, stress, and more using all natural medical therapies. We treat the source of your problems, not just your symptoms. For more information, go to abetteryouhealthcare.com or call today to set up your appointment. 352-615-5566.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala!
All right, 6 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Wednesday morning. It's only Wednesday, right?
Yeah, it is. It's moving on to the week now.
I am so looking forward to this next interview. Frank Schaeffer is a deep-thinking man. I don't know if he considers himself that. I was looking at the book. I've not finished it yet. It is titled, the title alone is going to get you talking. The title of the book is Why I Am an Atheist Who Believes in God. Frank Schaeffer is the author. The subtitle, How to Give Love, Create Beauty, and Find Peace. I have a feeling we're going to agree. But before I say anything, let me just tell you this, that I grew up as a little kid. We went to church and Sunday school and all that. And you know, God exists. It's just a matter of fact. And you get older, you start saying, I don't know what they mean. What is God? I mean, why is there a war? Why is there death? Why is there sickness? What is going on here? And what is this whole deal where if you don't believe in something you can't see, you go to hell? I don't even understand that. It doesn't even make any sense to me. So you start questioning everything. And if I offended anybody, I'm not doing it to offend or to shock. Or I'm just telling you, I think this is something we all go through. We all wonder.
Yeah.
You know, and then I've had conversations with atheists who will deny even the very notion of intelligent design. Like there's no intelligence behind the design. Even if I go as far as say, well, what if that intelligence could be scientifically explained? Wouldn't that still be intelligence? And therefore, wouldn't it technically be God? Maybe we just don't know what to call this force.
Yeah.
So we call it God and we give it a personality, or him a person. I don't know. And then, of course, it comes down to the religions that teach about God, and that's a whole different story. But, and here's the last thing I want to say before we put Frank on the air, a conversation I had with another atheist, I said, you do believe in Jesus? And he says, no, I don't. Why would you tell me I do? Well, everything you say, brotherly love, do unto others before, a lot of the things that Jesus talked about. So that's like believing in somebody. If somebody's a rotten scoundrel, you don't believe in him, even though you know he's standing right there. Yeah. It doesn't mean you don't believe he exists. It means you don't trust in him.
Yes.
I'm 60 years old. If I told you I knew the answer to any God question, I'd be lying to you. And the one thing I know from the Bible is that you shouldn't lie. So
yeah.
How do I tell you something that is not the truth if telling you that is a lie? Why I Am an Atheist Who Believes in God. Frank Schaeffer, good morning. You are an interesting and deep-thinking man. Good morning, sir.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Larry.
You an artist, too?
I am an artist. That's why I'm standing on the cover of this book with a bunch of paintbrushes in one hand. I had a photographer friend visiting me, and he hauled me out of my studio in a T-shirt that has a hole in it, bare feet, and jeans that are stained with paint, and I'm standing in front of a woodshed where I keep my lawnmower. So this is like a glamour shot, right?
It's effective.
It's an awesome shot. It's an awesome shot. You look angry, too, by the way.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not angry. I'm just like, I'm sitting there thinking, hey, I'm in the middle of painting a picture here. You know, he had one where I was smiling, but then it's like, why is this paint-spattered guy look so pleased with himself? So we went with the frown. But I'm really not as angry as I look on that picture.
Where are you, first of all? Where are you calling from?
I am sitting in Massachusetts, in Salisbury, a little town just north of Boston.
Oh, okay.
Did you grow up with the church? Did your parents take you to Sunday school, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, my own spiritual journey, sort of like yours, but in a different framework. My parents were living in Switzerland. They were American missionaries who had gone over after the war. You and I are about the same age. I'm 62, so I was born in 52. And my dad was a fundamentalist Presbyterian minister, and then he became well-known in evangelical circles when he started writing books. And then in the mid-'70s to the mid-'80s, he became one of the leaders of the religious right And as you know, only the British royal family and mafia members have the same level of nepotism that evangelicals do when sons follow fathers. And so, I was his sidekick for a while and actually flying around the country, believe it or not, seems like another lifetime, but I'm not making this up, in Jerry Falwell's borrowed jet, going from big auditoriums to churches to Christian colleges and all this with my dad. And then when he died in 84, I just kind of woke up and said, what am I doing here? I don't like the company I'm keeping. I don't believe half of what we're saying. The religious right is becoming a very hate-filled bunch of people. And I rethought my life and got out. I went into the movie business for a while, was in Hollywood directing films. I made 4 very forgettable feature films, but it was a living. And then I wrote a first novel in 1990 called Portofino that was successful, got good reviews, and that's about 15 books ago, fiction and literary nonfiction. Some have been bestsellers, some have dropped like stones into a pond, never to be seen again. And more recently, I've been writing some memoirs. I wrote a book called Crazy for God that kind of had a self-explanatory subtitle of how I grew up as one of the elect, helped found the religious right, and lived to take all or almost all of it back. And then I got such a response off that from both atheists and evangelicals, Roman Catholics, Jews, and others, asking me what I believe, that I wrote this book, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God, How to Give Love, Create Beauty, and Find Peace. So it's really a story about a personal journey. I'm not telling anyone else what they should believe.
Yeah, right.
I'm done with that. I'm just saying, look, here's what happened to me, and here's the kind of spirituality that has given me some peace in my life. Here's my story. So it's as much about my grandchildren, my relationship with my family, as it is about anything theological.
Well, except for flying in the jet and some of the other things that are only possible in modern times, your story isn't all that different than the story of Jesus. So, I mean, Jesus was very much opposed to the established religion of his day.
Yes, absolutely.
But at the same time was trying to teach people how to live and be good to one another.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. I'm so glad you have sensitivity to that. You get a lot of interviews and you talk about politics and everything else, but nobody cuts to the chase. But actually, the last third of my book is taking a hard look at that very question and saying, look, why am I an atheist and a secular person on one hand and trying to follow Jesus on the other? Well, for one thing, I'm against labeling. So who is only one thing? I mean, hey, I've been married for 44 years to Jeannie. I got her pregnant when we were 17 and 18, which, by the way, is an interesting thing to do in the middle of a fundamentalist community. That went down really
You were
well.
in front of them? That wasn't good. You should have at least gone into a closet or something.
Yeah, and now I got 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren. But here's the thing, if I had to define what the word marriage or love was, say like you tried to define the word belief, what's it mean to be a Christian? On some days, love with my wife means we just come back together after we've had a horrendous fight. On another day, it's when we're having sex. On another day, it's bringing her a cup of coffee in bed. Well, the same thing goes for these labels we affix, like atheism. Hey, I know atheists who pray when they're in a jam. I know preachers who doubt the existence of God on some days and maybe all the time. But if we're all just our labels, then it doesn't really reflect the truth about us. And I think that's
Right. See, and this is what I think you're telling us what Jesus wants us to. This is what I'm thinking. As I hear you, when somebody says you don't get to heaven unless you believe in Jesus, I think believing in Jesus is more about living the way He wants you to live, even if you never even heard the name Jesus.
Absolutely. And what do you think the parable of the Good Samaritan was about, if not that?
So why then do you consider yourself an atheist? That part doesn't even make sense to me.
Well, part of it is the title is meant to pull people into a book. And secondly, basically, what I'm trying to say is, hey, listen, I refuse labels. I'm not going to be called any one thing because, listen, we have the right to change our minds, and life is a journey, not a series of fixed points. I don't buy the born-again paradigm that if you quote-unquote accept Jesus now, you're not going to burn in hell forever. I think that when you look at who Jesus was, as I do in this book, really, to me, what Jesus did most significantly was plant what in the book I call an empathy time bomb in history. And then he lit the fuse and walked away. And it's still going off. It's going off every time an ambulance pulls up and we take someone to a hospital instead of just lying there. Jesus' empathy time bomb goes off every time my wife forgives me or I forgive her for a fight we've had. The empathy time bomb goes off when a woman is allowed to vote and when a black man can stand in the front of a bus. I say stand because no one can find a seat these days, and get a ride. So the fact of the matter is, when you look at Jesus in the context of the New Testament, what people wrote. When he confronts the people who say that you've got to believe right or get stoned to death or go to hell, or confronts people who are waving his day's Bible around in his face, which was called the Torah or the law, every time we see Jesus interacting with his Bible, he's not an evangelical fundamentalist. He says, hey, the Bible may say this, or the Torah says, or the law says, but, an important word, B-U-T, here's what I'm telling you. Now imagine an evangelical preacher who stood up and read a passage from the Bible and said, okay, that's all very well and good, but now here's what I'm going to tell you, and my opinion overrides it. But then on the other hand, if Jesus comes to us as the Son of God, as the Creator, which evangelicals believe, then surely he ought to be the lens through which we interpret everything in Scripture, but more importantly in life. And so what do we see him actually doing? He breaks the Levitical law and touches a leper. 2 whole chapters say you're not supposed to. A woman who's bleeding comes up and touches him, and instead of rebuking her and saying, you're a second-class citizen, now I'm defiled and unclean according to the law, he says, your faith made you whole. The Samaritan woman at the well comes up to Jesus. Even she says, you shouldn't be talking to me. I'm from an enemy tribe. I don't believe right. I have the wrong theology. I'm not saved. I don't go to the right church. Jesus says, hey, you know what? None of this matters. A day is coming when all God wants is to be honored in spirit and truth. So if Jesus was alive today, I can tell you one thing. He'd never get a job as an evangelical pastor. And he would be kicked out of any church as a heretic because he's saying,
which is kind of what happened to him in his own time.
Yeah.
Well, he got himself killed. I mean, that was the ultimate heresy trial.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm trying to say and why I'm an atheist who believes in God is two basic things. The reason I'm still a follower of Jesus is because he does not say people are going to burn forever if you don't get the theology right. He says what God wants is the content of your character. Say the journey that I've had becoming a better, more patient grandfather than I was a young jerk teenage father who was having babies when I was still a kid. A life journey, and that's what it's about, and that's what the book is about.
Frank, I know Robin and I know a rabbi, a young man, and he is probably more. And put this in quotation marks, he's more Christian than I am. He doesn't believe in Christ. He doesn't believe in the New Testament. I mean, he's purely a rabbi.
Yeah.
But I mean, he is a gentle man. He is a good man. He will give you the shirt off his back, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that I've been that good. So why would God take me and not him? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I have this theory, and just bear with me if you don't mind, since I'm loving this conversation, by the way.
Thank you.
If we were to say believing in Jesus is the only way to have, because Jesus does say that, I am the way and the truth and the only way and the truth. Okay, so he does say that. So assuming that the guy gave us everything absolutely true, that would mean that statement is also true. So here's what I take that to mean. If I tell you that we're going to go out west and we're going to have to cross this bridge called the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's the only way we can get to the other side. I know there are other ways, but let's just say that's the only way. Okay. And you're going to have to believe in this bridge, because if you don't believe in this bridge, you're never going to get across that water.
Right.
Okay. And all of your life you say, oh, come on. I know how to swim. I know how to build a boat. I know everything. Okay. All of your life you think you got it straight. Now you're at that point where you're there. And you realize, oh my gosh, I was wrong all along. The people who told me I needed the bridge were right.
Right.
Well, there's the bridge. Right. So if you die and you are all of your life denying this, and then all of a sudden there he is saying, well, come on in. I guess they were right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but I see it too in a much more practical way, and I think Jesus was very unreligious and much more practical, because look, he keeps telling everybody around him that, for instance, the only person they're going to remember 1,000 years from now, says Jesus, not saying 1,000 years, is a whore who poured perfume on my feet and then cried. He's always with the person in front of him. He's not saying they're going to remember her because of her correct theology. They're going to remember her because of an act of compassion, kindness, and empathy, where she really understood the jam he was personally in and honored him, and also was repenting of her own mistakes. It always gets down to that level. Mary and Martha, I mean, picture the Middle East now in an ISIS training camp or a Taliban training camp or Saudi Arabia at the time, and then picture the Middle East of Jesus' time. Women were treated like dirt. And Jesus tells Mary and Martha, he's with Mary and Martha, and they're unaccompanied females in the Middle East 2,000 years ago with a stranger, basically a man. And he says, come out of the kitchen, stop doing housework, and let's just talk as equals. Wow. this is off the page. I look at what Jesus actually said in terms of empathy.
Absolutely.
And he might as well have gotten a blackboard and written up Einstein's equation of EMC squared for all anybody then would understand it. It's taken thousands of years to unfold, and we're still not there. This empathy time bomb keeps going off, and I think you make the point exactly right about the Golden Gate, but I would just add a practical twist. I don't think it's the next life. I think it's now. And I think Jesus is saying, look, there is a way to live that leads to salvation, not just in eternity, but now, in terms of human relationships. And I'm the way, the truth, and the life, because guess what? If you treat everybody like crap, your life is going to become crap. Your culture is going to become crap. You've got to get your act together and start treating people the way I'm showing you I treat them, which means a Samaritan woman who's a stranger and a female and the wrong person, wrong tribe, wrong religion. I'm treating her like an equal, and I'm saying, hey, none of this matters. On and on it goes. He talks about a Roman pagan who's not a Jew or a Christian, and he says, this is the greatest faith I found in Israel. What's this supposed to mean? He's looking at the content of the character. So I totally agree with you when you said, Larry, who is the Christian if you talk about following Jesus? The guy who never heard of Jesus, who treats everybody around him as Jesus called us to, even though he doesn't know that Jesus called us to, or some Southern congressman who just got voted in by being an elder in a church and saying he's a Christian and he's against gay people and against this and against that, who's cutting programs for health care, for the poor, for everybody around him, and basically doing the work of the philosopher Ayn Rand, financed by the Koch brothers, who want permission to build, a refinery in his district. So who's doing Jesus' work?
Well, yeah, but you could argue that. You could argue it in the same way that Robert Schuller argues that you shouldn't help a baby chick out of the egg. He makes that example that the baby chick needs the strength that it will get from its adversarial experiences. I knew I was going to enjoy the conversation.
But you know where I'm going with it. I'm basically saying,
I do,
hey,
but
it's like marriage. I mean,
there's not a whole lot I can argue with you on, which does make interviews more fun when I'm arguing.
Right.
But at the same time,
hey, I can think of something truly outrageous to say, and then we can. But hey, listen. I mean, it's like marriage. I think one thing we all make a mistake, and that's why I liked your Golden Gate example, is we take these issues out of real life as if somehow this is all stuff from another planet that's in a special category. I think faith is the same as everything else. And I use the analogy of marriage again. I mean, what leads to a good marriage is not following a book on marriage or going to the right seminar and ticking up all the boxes or standing up and talking about you're having a wedding anniversary. It's bringing your wife a cup of coffee in bed. It's trying to make sure that your partner is having pleasure when you have sex. It's taking care of children. It's cleaning the kitchen. It's cutting the lawn. It's taking the garbage out. This is the real world, and the same applies to faith. Faith is about a daily struggle with our own selves and trying to mirror something better. Yeah. And that's the bottom line. And if it's not about that, then it's not about anything. Well, and the irony is there are some atheists who fought that struggle better than we have, and then there's some Christians who truly fight that struggle. You can't generalize, but that's what the title, Why I'm an Atheist Who Believes in God, is meant to do. It's meant to pull the chain of people who look at the label instead of the
You got it. I don't disagree. In fact, that was my argument with the atheist I was telling you about. This guy was just as good as the rabbi I was just telling you about.
Yeah. Right.
He also was a good person, and I was telling him, you do believe in Jesus, and he just refused to see my point that maybe he doesn't accept the fact that Jesus rose from the dead. That's a hard one for a lot of people to grasp.
Right.
But if you just took everything from before that point in the story, right. I do believe that, by the way. Mm-hmm. I do think he absolutely came back. He had a physical body, and I don't understand it, but I do believe it happened. I don't think 4 guys would have written about it if it didn't happen.
Right.
So,
does some of your imagery from the different books that you write appear in your artwork?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I've got this art site, frankschaefferart.com, and then I've got my paintings on it. But, a lot of the titles, when I don't know what other people paint. I look at a lot of art in museums and so forth, but I tend to give titles to my paintings which sort of exemplify. I'm looking at one on my wall here that I just call Roses Falling from Heaven, and that kind of a thing. So I think in very spiritual terms, in terms of what I paint. They aren't, quote, religious paintings, but to me, religion is about what I see around me. It's the unconditional trust and love I see on the face of my grandchildren, which I'm so grateful for, because when I was a jerk father, very certain of all my theology, throwing my weight around thinking I had to be head of the home because, quote, unquote, the Bible said so, I was treating my children pretty badly, and what I'd see if they broke a plate or something was fear. Now with Lucy and Jack, age 6 and 4, a lot goes on, and we have our ups and downs, but it's not fear. It's unconditional trust, because they've got someone who's learned, which, by the way, we come back to the big subject here. How do we imagine a creator who's stupider than I am and doesn't love his children as much as I love my grandchildren? Is there anything my granddaughter Lucy, who's 6 years old, who lived the first 2 years of her life in my house, and we bonded like crazy? I mean, the other day somebody said to her, "Is this your grandfather?" And Lucy wasn't being smart about it. She literally just said back, and I had not taught her this line. She's only 6. She says, "Well, he is my grandfather, but actually we're more like twins."
Oh, wow.
She loves you so much.
I just went to
and I basically, if I had won the Penn Award or an Oscar, I couldn't be more pleased. I mean, that was like, okay, now my life has been worth something.
Well, I
learned something.
And
so how do you imagine a grandfather, crazy old crappy me, at age 62, who gets such pleasure out of that, and yet our Creator is sitting there saying, "I've created most of the human race to burn forever because they didn't go to the right church."
I know.
This is crazy.
I think this is the first time I'm going to be able to say, I spoke to an atheist today who actually knows more about God than...
And he makes sense.
Knows more about the Bible, even.
The last third of my book is about Jesus, which you won't find in Christopher Hitchens or Dawkins' books, I don't think.
But I do think that religion, in a way, is a very, very manipulative thing, and I'm not saying religious people, and I'm not saying all churches in any way. I'm just saying that sometimes the organized, and it doesn't have to be Christian. It can be Buddhist. It can be Muslim. I mean, my goodness, Muslims have their fair share of things we can point out that need to be fixed.
Right.
Are you going to go see that movie about Dawkins that's coming out?
Yeah, I probably will. Hey, listen, speaking of movies, I was interviewed in a movie that's on Netflix now. It's not my movie, called Hellbound, which deals with this question. People ought to watch it because, I'm in it, but so are a lot of other people, and it runs the gamut of everybody who thinks, everybody's going to hell and they're happy about it, to people like me who are saying you have to be crazy to think this. But, going back to what you were saying a minute ago, Larry, I have a phrase in my book, and I know it's a little bit cute, but I like it because it really sums up what I think. And that is, religion is a neurological disorder, but faith is the only cure.
Yeah, I don't know about
religion is a neurological disorder, and faith
it
is
depends.
the only cure.
But here,
and that's, I think, exactly what Jesus was telling the people of his time.
Well, except that. Some people, for religion, the word to do something religiously means to do it regularly. Simple as that.
I'm in church every Sunday with my grandchildren. I go to a Greek Orthodox church.
Right, I'm not arguing that.
Taking the liturgy. Thank God for paradox and blessed hypocrisy, because here I am talking about all this, and then I'll be back in church again. And people say, well, why do you, what are you doing there if you have doubt? Well, then what's anybody doing with a marriage?
Well, why do you go to a restaurant unless you're hungry?
Yeah, exactly right. And, a couple of years ago, I was standing in line for communion, and we receive it from a chalice with a spoon like babies getting fed, so it takes a while to shuffle up. And I always have my grandchildren in my arms and so forth, so you forget they're even there. And I had my eyes closed, and I was really feeling depressed, like my life is crazy. I've done so many things I regret. Why am I here? This is pointless. And I'd actually forgotten I was holding Lucy. She was about 3.5, and I felt this little touch on my cheek. And I looked up, and I was looking straight into her eyes, and I realized she's seeing me now, today, as I wish I could see myself. As I wish I could see myself. And then this thought crashed into my brain. I have seen the face of God. Because this is how I think our Creator sees us, as we wish we could see ourselves.
That is beautiful.
And so someone says to me, well, why with doubt are you in church? I'll tell you why, because if I could have a moment like that every 15 years, that would be what I would hang on to.
That's beautiful. That's great stuff. I've loved this conversation. The clock is telling me I have to go, but I just want you to know how much I appreciated it, Frank. Frank Schaeffer, the book is called Why I Am an Atheist Who Believes in God. You're going to love the book. Trust me. I have a copy. Call me if you want it, and the rest of us have to go buy it. I've got 14 seconds. How do we buy it?
On Amazon, on Kindle, in Barnes & Noble.
And go to his website, frankschaefferart.com, SCHAEFFER. Robin already has that on the website, on our website. Thank you, Frank. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Hey, I love this. This was so lovely to talk with someone that really, we could sit down and talk for a long time.
We sure could. Thank you, Frank.
100 miles of its state throughway.
In some spots, it's 6 feet. There's still parts of the highway that are closed right now. Those cars are still abandoned out there, and we've seen people having to walk far distance